For many people who aren't familiar with the backstory here, why did you decide to write this memo 3.5 years into your work at Google?
Yeah, so I've just noticed many problems in Google's culture, and I really wanted to fix them.
Well, that's a pretty simple reason, but I just mean, was there any, you had gone through some workplace diversity training or something like that? Was that, what was your, moment that kind of made you say, I have to write this now and I have to put this out there?
Yeah, so about a month and a half ago, I attended a private diversity summit, and they revealed a lot of policies that I disagreed with, where we were pressuring individual managers to increase the diversity of their team, and we were really treating people differently based on their race or gender. And I felt that that was really misguided because it can cause a lot of actual intergroup conflict that is ultimately bad for everyone.
James, that goes to one of the questions I've received about your memo. There are people who said, why does someone feel the need to share his personal political views in the workplace? Why do you feel this is a workplace issue and not one of your personal beliefs?
So many of the things that I addressed were the actual terms and conditions of the working environment. And so when there are certain people, or when we're actually using someone's race or gender to decide how or when they'll be promoted, or what team they'll go on, that is affecting everyone at Google, and that's creating negative stereotypes, which is a real problem. And we've already seen it in academia, and it's only going to get worse.
I think you mentioned that you had worked on the memo with others, or at least spoken to them about its contents before this. Were those other people at Google who felt the same way as you?
Yes, this was all within Google. And yes, there was
go ahead.
A lot of argument.
So is it that people had felt this way all along, or is it that it has gotten much worse here lately? And was the intention of your memo to change the company's culture? And is that going to happen now that you're no longer at the company?
Yeah, so I think that it has probably gotten worse over time for many of the reasons that I've stated, where people don't feel like they can express a differing viewpoint. And so these policies only get more extreme. And so I do hope that Google does address a lot of the issues that I mentioned and really empower people to be able to express their opinion, because that actually decreases worker output. Not being able to express yourself is the largest thing that Google has found to decrease worker output.
And what kind of feedback have you gotten from other Silicon Valley employees, James, since this publication?
I've gotten a lot of support, and it seems like Google isn't necessarily an outlier in this, that this is happening in many other companies.
So if you worked at Apple or Amazon or wherever, do you expect that it would be the same kind of internal culture based on what you're aware of, and that they would have responded the same way?
It's possible. I obviously can't say about any individual company, but I've heard a lot of feedback that it is very similar.
I saw you were surprised that you were actually fired. And are you pursuing a lawsuit against Google as a result of that?
Yeah, I was very surprised, because I was pointing out actual problems in our culture and potentially illegal practices that we were doing. And so I was really just trying to help us, and I never meant for it to be leaked at all. So I am pursuing legal remedies at the moment.
What kinds of legal remedies are available to you?
I'm still exploring that.
Is there anything about the memo that you would have said differently, omitted, or included in retrospect?
Yeah, so I think I definitely wouldn't have used the word neuroticism, even though that is the official term used in psychology, just because that has a very negative connotation. But a lot of the actual content, I haven't seen really disputed or proven false. And I think that hopefully there is a lot of good that happens from this. So it's hard to really regret anything.
You mentioned neuroticism. One of your points in the memo was that women tend to be more quote unquote neurotic in the workplace. Do you want to elaborate on that at all, what you meant by that, or do you want to walk back from making that point at all?
So neuroticism is just a personality trait that measures, for example, how prone one is to anxiety. And so we had Google-wide surveys that showed that women were showing more anxiety at Google. And we were using that as evidence that we're being sexist against women. But I was simply pointing this out to point that maybe we should control for someone's innate neuroticism. We can give personality tests to everyone, and then that would actually show if we're treating people differently or if it's just someone's innate tendency to have anxiety.
Now, as you know, there's been a huge reaction, not only to what you said, but also to the way that Google has handled it. In fact, there have been some alt-right sites calling for a boycott of Google. I believe there might be some kind of protest planned for the end of the week. Do you support those efforts?
So I support Google, and I really do want Google to improve. So I don't support efforts to try to hurt Google directly. I think that Google's culture really does need to change if it wants to do what's best for both its employees and its users, though.
So are you involved with any of those plans for the protest or boycotts or anything like that?
No, not really.
Do you think that those shouldn't move forward then?
I honestly don't really know much about them, so I can't really comment.
The only reason I ask as well is I know some of the first interviews that you gave were to, and again, I use the term alt-right loosely. I'm not exactly sure how we would define it, but I noticed that those were the kinds of websites or people you spoke to immediately after the publication. Is that important to you that you are either identified as part of that community or, felt like that was the best place to go to express your views?
No, so I've given interviews to many different places. I just gave an interview to CNN, so I'm really trying to not just favor one side or the other. I'm really trying to bridge the divide between the two sides and showing what the perspective is between, for example, the left and the right, and how they can be complementary to each other, and how we shouldn't just see each other as mortal enemies that need to be destroyed.
I don't think anyone's accusing CNN of being alt-right, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I am curious, I mentioned the fallout for some of your colleagues. Google CEO Sundar Pichai planned to hold a town hall after this memo became public to address some of the company's concerns, and he canceled it because of quote-unquote doxing, meaning that people who disagreed with you were being targeted or just might not feel safe expressing their opinions or things like that. Do you regret seeing your colleagues, your former colleagues, being treated that way?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think anyone should be treated like that. And I think it was largely canceled because there was still a lot of emotional tension happening at Google, and they wanted for people to calm down before that, because they could have made the questions anonymous. So there was no threat for doxing, for example.
Do you know who released the document or the memo in the first place?
I think that it was people that were against me, because those were the people that were on Twitter exposing internal Google problems to the world. And then they were the first ones to talk to Gizmodo.
David Brooks of the New York Times has said that Google CEO should step down over his handling of this whole affair. Is that, is that something that you think is appropriate as well?
I really can't say. I think Sundar is a very competent person, and I think that maybe he mishandled this situation, but I don't know if that calls for firing him in general. I do think that there need to be many changes that happen at Google, though, especially in upper management, where, for example, there was no one in upper management that felt like they could support me in any way because the angry mob would have gone against them. So the whole structure of how internal things at Google work needs to change.
And James, what about you? Are you going back to Silicon Valley to work? Are you drawing upon, some of your undergrad or master's work in science? What's next for you, do you think?
Yeah, I'm still figuring that out. I do think that I've at least been given a voice, and so I can at least give my opinion on many of these topics that I feel like need my voice. So I'm looking forward to that, but I do still like tech, and so I may look for a job there if I'm not blacklisted from a lot of these major companies.
Well, on that front, what message would you give to women at Google or in tech in general who think you've now created a hostile work environment for them?
I would say that that's really a distraction from the real issues that I was pointing out and the real hostile environment that is currently happening at Google and has been happening in many Silicon Valley companies, where people that aren't in the left's ideology can't express any of their viewpoints. We can't express any viewpoint that doesn't fall in line with the left's ideology. And that's a real shame. And that's really causing a hostile work environment.
James, last question. Did you vote for Donald Trump? Are you a supporter of the president's?
I'm not really a supporter. I don't really pay attention to actual politics very much, the day-to-day politics. I'm mostly interested in the ideas and how we can bridge the divide between the two sides. And what's happened recently is just increasing partisanship, which I really don't support.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.